Ayush, Government of India, Sri Sarbananda Sonowalji has just arrived. He will be with us any minute. May I request all of you to kindly settle down. I request all of you to kindly rise as we invite the guests onto the stage and kindly stay risen for the national anthem. Kindly settle down. To ceremoniously begin this conference, may I now request our chief guests and other dignitaries on the stage to kindly light the lamp. May I now invite Dr. Shantala Hegde, Additional Professor of the Department of Psychology at NIMHANS, to deliver the invocation.
मनोबुद्ध्यहंकार अहङ्कारचित्ता निनाहं न च श्रोत्रजिह्वे न च घ्राणनेत्रे न च व्योमभूमिर्न तेजो न वायुः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम् मनोबुद्ध्यहङ्कारचित्ता निनाहं न च श्रोत्रजिह्वे न च घ्राणनेत्रे न च व्योमभूमिर्न तेजो न वायुः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम् न च प्राणसंज्ञो न वै पञ्चवायुः न वा सप्तधातुर्न वा पञ्चकोशः न वाक्पाणिपादौ न चोपस्थपायु चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम् न च प्राणसंज्ञो न वै पञ्चवायुः न वा सप्तधातुर्न वा पञ्चकोशः न वाक्पाणिपादौ न चोपस्थपायु चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम् न मे द्वेषरागौ न मे लोभमोहौ मदो नैव मे नैव मात्सर्यभावः न धर्मो न चार्थो न कामो न मोक्षः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम् न मे द्वेषरागौ न मे लोभमोहौ मदो नैव मे नैव मात्सर्यभावः न धर्मो न चार्थो न कामो न मोक्षः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम् न पुण्यं न पापं न सौख्यं न दुःखं न मन्त्रो न तीर्थो न वेदा न यज्ञा अहं भोजनं नैव भोज्यं न भोक्ता चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम् न पुण्यं न पापं न सौख्यं न दुःखं न मन्त्रो न तीर्थो न वेदा न यज्ञाः अहं भोजनं नैव भोज्यं न भोक्ता चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम् न मृत्युर्न शङ्का न मे जातिभेदः पिता नैव मे नैव माता च जन्मा न बन्धुर्न मित्रं गुरुर्नैव शिष्यः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम् न मृत्युर्न शङ्का न मे जातिभेदः पिता नैव मे नैव माता च जन्मा न बन्धुर्न मित्रं गुरुर्नैव शिष्यः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम् अहं निर्विकल्पो निराकाररूपो विभुत्वाच्च सर्वत्र सर्वेन्द्रियाणां न चासङ्गतं नैव मुक्तिर्न बन्धः चिदानन्दरूप शिवो अहं निर्विकल्पो निराकाररूपो विभुत्वाच्च सर्वत्र सर्वेन्द्रियाणां न चासङ्गतं नैव मुक्तिर्न बन्धः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं 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 शिवोऽहम्
Thank you, madam, for a melodious recital. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of India Foundation and the National Institute of Mental Health Sciences, I'm delighted to welcome you all to the first of its kind International Conference on Consciousness. We have with us over the next 2 days some globally eminent researchers and inventors in the area of physics, biology, neuroscience, artificial intelligence, cybernetics, quantum computing, and all allied fields, as well as scholars and spiritual teachers of the major Indic spiritual and psychological disciplines and doctrines, deliberating and exploring consciousness. With no further ado, I invite Com Carpentier de Gordon, Distinguished Fellow, India Foundation, to kindly deliver the welcome address. He is currently also the convener of the editorial board of World Affairs Journal. Over to you, sir, for the welcome address.
Namaskar, greetings, welcome to all. It is my privilege and pleasure to welcome to this inaugural function the Honorable Minister for Ayush, Sri Sarbananda Sonoval, as well as Dr. Pratima Murthy, Director of NIMHANS, and Mr. C.A. Prasad, President of the Karnataka Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry. This is a very auspicious occasion. I also give a warm welcome on behalf of India Foundation, and in particular of its member of the Board of Governors and founder, Sri Ram Madhav, to the several participants who have come sometimes from great distance to enlighten us on their work and research. Some of them are indeed among the most eminent in their field worldwide. Some could not come, unfortunately, due to the difficult circumstances the world is going through, and will be with us online in the next 2 days. Others still are watching us, or will be watching us, on the live stream from all over the world, because many of the top specialists, experts on the field of consciousness from all disciplines are indeed aware of this conference and are wishing it well, and hope that if further conferences are held in the coming years, they will be able to participate in person. I will simply say that, there are 3 Mahavakyas. One is Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, the other is Tattvamasi, and the third is Manodrishyam Idam Lokam. That circumscribes the basic theme of this conference. Consciousness is critical, not only critical, it is fundamental, because anything that exists in our perception is in fact mediated through our consciousness and perhaps the creation of it. This is taught by a number of ancient disciplines in the Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain traditions. And it is also taught increasingly in a number of advanced scientific and philosophical institutes worldwide, because as research progresses and acquires more and more sophisticated instruments, it comes closer and closer to the Vedantic and Buddhist perspectives. Even though they may not be seen as identical, they still converge, and so does physics today. And physics in turn inspires biology, psychology, and all the other sciences, whether soft or hard. We even get into technology, and that has ominous implications. It has, of course, immense potential for improving human life and health, but it also has military applications, which are increasingly being developed. And I experienced when we were planning this conference how in some advanced research centers, which I will not name, there was great reluctance in getting involved because most of the research is considered secret, privilege, and therefore should not be in any way made available in other countries. So this is the world we're going into, and we have to be aware of that. Now, I really wish all those who have come, the delegates in particular, and I also greet both Swamiji and Geshe, who represent their respective traditions. So I do think this will be a feast for the spirit, and also probably for future scientific development. And I'm sure that both NIMHANS and India Foundation will remain closely involved with the process that is starting today, and that the next 2 days will lead to a very brilliant and very innovative, I would say, Shraddhanjali and Gitanjali of contributions to understanding consciousness. So I again thank all of you and wish you well during this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now request our chief guest for this evening, the Honorable Minister for Ayush, Government of India, Shri Sarbanand Sonowal ji, to release the souvenir booklet of the conference. May I request Madam Dr. Bindu Kuti and P.N. Ravindra onto the stage for the release of the souvenir, please. Thank you. I now request Shri Kamlesh Patel ji to deliver the conference keynote address. Shri Kamlesh ji, also known as Daji by his followers, is the fourth and current spiritual guide of the Heartfulness movement. He has spent the past 4 decades training people across the world in heartfulness meditation and is the author of 2 bestsellers, The Heartfulness Way and Designing Destiny. Daji is a thought leader, a change maker, bringing together the best of ancient traditions of yoga and modern science to offer a set of remarkable meditative techniques known as heartfulness. We have Daji connecting to us virtually today. Over to you, sir, for the keynote address.
Thank you for having me, Honorable Minister of Ayush, Sri Sonowal ji, Madam Dr. Pratima Murthy, Honorable Minister Kesava Suhakar, Minister of Medical Education, Health, Family Welfare, State of Karnataka, Madam Bindu Kuti, Dr. Com Carpentier, Gourdon, and Dr. I.S. Prasad. It's a great honor of speaking with you all and trying to learn from each other what consciousness is all about and how we can help ourselves with the evolution of consciousness, because that is the main goal of our human existence. Body can only age, it cannot evolve. Soul is immutable and cannot evolve. So what must evolve is our consciousness. Many are struggling trying to define consciousness, and we all define based on our understanding, based on our experiences, based on our so-called encounters in day-to-day life. To me, I briefly describe it as degree of awareness, degree of perception, and degree of appropriate responses to this awareness and perception. So there are three levels to it. I become aware of certain thing around me or within me. I perceive at a different level, and I respond appropriately. Now, there are many things we are not able to perceive things. For example, I become aware that somebody is in my next room, but I really don't know who that person is. That's a perception of real truth. Next one is, what do I do with that? Suppose there is a thief in my room, next room. How will that my response will be? Or I become aware that my exam is next month, so and so has called me for an interview. How do I perceive that? And how do I respond to that? So it's a whole spectrum of it. I'd like to share with you a little encounter I had many years back, sometime in 2003. Basically a pharmacist practicing in New York. And we opened many pharmacies across New York City. The best location to open such pharmacies is considered, hospitals or in front of the hospitals. So one day, one of my managers of the pharmacy took me to a location which was a great location right in front of the hospital, where you can make lots and lots of money there. What happened there? It was occupied by a grocery person. He used to run that business for many years. And he says he is tired of doing that business there, and he would like to transfer the lease of that property, and you can develop it as a pharmacy. Great. Those days I used to smoke cigarettes, so I gave him a business. I bought a carton of cigarettes from him, lit up a cigarette, and I said, I need to use your restroom. Can I go use your restroom? He said, why not? Go ahead. So I took a cigarette, went to his restroom. I could not ease myself in that restroom. Suddenly, something overpowering gripped me with so much of fear, so much of heaviness. Unusual heaviness suddenly gripped me. I just came out unutilized. I could not use the restroom. I just came out. Later on, I asked the manager who took me to that location and asked, what is going on there? I just could not believe myself. It was so heavy, so fear-ridden. So she called up the owner of that grocery. She said, what has happened there? Anything very special that you like to describe? He said, yes, just a month back, the cashier of that grocery store was taken to the back of the grocery store when it was held hostage with a gun. He was shot dead. He was killed in that bathroom. So now when we talk of consciousness, awareness, perception, how is it that memory of an episode lingered on in that bathroom? Many things that happen in some houses, the way certain families interact. Certain families has their own traditions. When you enter the house of a very sattvic person versus where you enter a family who are tamasic in nature. You feel the difference. When we are very sensitive, we can see the atmosphere, the environment, the aura of that place. All of a sudden, you feel so joyful in that place. Some places you feel so tensed and horrified, and you feel like running away from such places. So one wonders, how is this consciousness, or if you like to call it, or how the action that has happened or been happening over day after day, and it changes the vibratory pattern of that atmosphere, and how that vibratory pattern grips us, affects us either in a positive way or in a negative way. So when we talk of, I see the topic non-dual and non-local. But you can understand this non-duality and non-locality of consciousness only when you understand duality of consciousness. What is duality of consciousness? When I'm interacting with you, I have a certain level of perception, understanding all about you. You are listening. There is an interaction, unspoken from your side, spoken from my side, and I'm responding based on the feelings that I get, how receptive you are, what could be perhaps a knot in your understanding, and I try to unwind that knot. So that is dual part of it. But when we talk of non-dual part of existence, when non-dual means I'm also not there and the other person is also not there. That is non-duality. And how being non-dual can help you understand or perceive consciousness. And from this non-dual to non-locality. Our shastras, our literature, especially Yoga Vasistha Sanhita, the dialogue between Lord Rama and his younger brother Lakshman and Mother Sita, how they spent their 14 years in the forest. They were discussing mainly this aspect of consciousness, which their gurus taught them, Vishwamitra and Vasistha. Same time zone, the same epoch. And during the same epoch, the father of Sita, Raja Janaka, with Astvakra, and how they discuss this topic of consciousness, dual as well as non-dual, and non-local to a certain extent. These are the modern terms we use. I would wish that all of us revisit Ashtavakra Sanhita at least once, since we are all interested in consciousness. That will really, really open up a new chapter in understanding consciousness. In order to further understand consciousness from all this, we are told that consciousness is made up of three fundamental things, main three. That means there are many other things that makes consciousness. Number one is the mind. Number two is buddhi or intellect. Number three is ego or ahankar. So chitta is made up of three major things: mind, buddhi, and ahankar. Now, what becomes of this consciousness, my chitta, at the pinnacle of its consciousness? Then I have to understand what becomes of these individual things like mind, what becomes of the mind, what becomes of the intellect, and what becomes of my ego when they also evolve, unless and until the functions of the mind, the functions of the intellect, and that of ahankar, the ego, unless and until they don't change for positive results, consciousness also cannot change. For example, if I cannot think properly, can I or will I be able to evolve my consciousness? Think over it. If I don't have really, really great intellect or intelligence or ability to intuit or that wisdom will I be able to help my consciousness evolve? And ego, what becomes of the consciousness when one is head bent on his own belief system and try to be extravagantly egoistic? Can highly arrogant and egoistic person understand consciousness, his own consciousness and that of others? Can such individuals' consciousness can at all evolve at all? What becomes of the mind, the function of the mind as it evolves? And as you understand, the function of the mind is primarily to think. And what becomes of it when it evolves through meditation, when this thought that I am meditating on Lord, be it Lord Krishna, be it Lord Jesus, be it Lord Buddha, doesn't matter. They are considered on a higher spectrum of consciousness. I am where I am, and I like to reach those lofty heights of consciousness. So I like to meditate on certain principles. And as I meditate, with an idea of those principles or qualities of those personalities, I begin to feel those qualities in my life. So I'm no longer thinking of qualities, but I'm enjoying or experiencing those qualities. So the function of the mind changes from thinking to actually feeling. So now when it comes to feeling, now heart function comes into picture and mind is left into relegation. Number two, scientists are struggling even today. We are able to pinpoint exactly through fMRI which is the seat of our thinking, which is the seat of our cognition, which is the seat of our memory and recall of memories, which is the seat where our optic nerve ends up and help to see things, where the auditory nerves end up and serve us to hear things, by taste buds, by touch abilities, etc. But scientists are yet to find the part of the brain involved in intuition. No one can pinpoint and say this is the part of the brain which is involved in intuition. Now, I would like to propose to all the great scientists, eminent scientists, that we have a team of children who are able to close their eyes and read books. They are able to intuit colors. Many of you must have witnessed there are many organizations who does this. But we have children who up to 99% of accuracy, they say, I can read this blindfold with closed eyes. We can also test what happens to a child when they close their eyes versus when they keep their eyes open. When you keep your eyes open in fMRI, you can see the lights lit up at the center of optic nerve. When you close your eyes, it's like a darkness over there. It is closed. Optic nerve center is not lighted up. So you have understood that when I keep this child in the tunnel, fMRI tunnel, and keep the eyes closed like this, the optical center is not activated. At that time, you give this child anything, a book to read with the closed eyes. When the child is reading a book, what is happening there? The child's consciousness is gone to a different level. They are not reading the way we read normally. It's not even braille. It's not even visual reading, nor it's a touch where one reads braille. But they intuit masterfully and read exactly what has been written there. And when that happens, fMRI will reflect the lit up zone of the brain and you will be able to see that this is the part of the brain involved in intuition. I think my time is up and I can't speak anymore. But we all can really, really do a research in this, help people to change the function of the mind, the function of the intellect, and perception of ego. That combined can change the consciousness. Finally, I would like to say the purpose of a human existence is to help evolve this consciousness. And what is meant by evolving the consciousness? It is very simple. We all have a certain level of perception or ability to perceive and be aware of things. It's very, Swami Vivekananda puts it nicely. He said it's a thin film of water. Available consciousness can be compared with a thin film of water, which is sandwiched between two giant oceans. Now you can imagine one ocean, Pacific Ocean, another Atlantic Ocean, and you have a fine film of consciousness, and that is the situation. Evolving this consciousness, my super consciousness to soar higher into sky of consciousness, and help my little film of consciousness to dive deeper, very deep depths of my heart into subconsciousness, and thus expanding this thin layer of film into a broadband film of consciousness. It is only through meditation and meditation alone one can improve consciousness. There is no other way. No machine can help you understand what is consciousness. Machines can today help us in identifying this zone of the brain or this particular part of the body, etc. But in order to understand consciousness, one will have to actually experience it. One wonders at such statements, Mahavakyas like Satchitanand. What is Satchitanand? Satchitanand is like a code word given by our sages and saints for the posterity to remember that there is something like Sat Chit Anand. It only means this, that when your Chit attains truth, you will become blissful. So try to attain this truthful state of existence. And later on, always this fundamental question remains. Just as sages and saints, yogis, they are busy with consciousness. They contemplate on consciousness. They enjoy the field of consciousness, Satchitanand. But the query or the quest remains in understanding what is it that supports consciousness. Thank you all. Thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you, Daji, for setting the tone for the next 2 days of the conference. May I now invite our chief guest this evening, Shri Sarbananda Sonowalji, the Honorable Minister for Ayush, Government of India, to deliver the inaugural address. Shri Sonowalji, who currently holds 2 cabinet portfolios, Port Shipping Waterways and Ayush, in the Government of India, is the former Chief Minister of Assam and has also previously served as the Minister for Sports and Youth Affairs, Government of India. Over to you, sir.
Namaskar. Respected Kamlesh de Patelji, the fourth spiritual guide in the Sahas mark system of Raja Yoga meditation. Respected Director NIMHANS, Dr. Pratima Murthy, respected Com Carpenter, distinguished fellow India Foundation, respected Dr. B.S. Sankaranarayana Rao, Register NIMHANS, and respected Dr. C.A. I.S. Prasad, President, Federation of Karnataka Chamber of Commerce and Industries, respected Ram Madhavji, and distinguished scientists, faculty members, ladies and gentlemen, and media friends. Today, I'm really delighted to present here because this is an occasion which can teach us more and more about our life. And I, being a minister of Ayush, I have developed a habit of glorifying nature. So, as you all know, the Mother Earth is created, I believe, for our comfortable stay in living. And nature has always been there to support us. That is why I believe the first principle, we must take care of nature. We must love nature. A thing of beauty is joy forever. Nature is so beautiful, so powerful, so affectionate, so love. Every quality of human being exists in nature. And I believe that's why, even in Mahabharata also, Bhagavan Krishna advised Arjuna not to break the law of nature. प्रकृति का नियम की किसी भी हालत में उल्लंघन नहीं होना चाहिए, यानी कि प्रकृति भगवान का ही रूप है. So I believe with that sense of feelings to nature, I begin my few lines. Hope you will all cooperate. I am very pleased to open the International Conference on Exploring Consciousness from non-duality to non-locality, which will begin by a debate about the current rise of AI-equipped machines that seem ever more capable not only of helping human beings, but also of replacing them and perhaps one day of controlling and ruling over them. This is one of the critical challenges that we face globally, all the more so because the technological leadership acquired by a few nations in this still relatively new area of research and development can lead to a new form of colonialism over the less wealthy and therefore less advanced countries in a world where the use of advanced computers, robots and other powerful tools that will increasingly mingle with and become part of human beings is becoming indispensable not only to compete in a high technology dependent economy but also to protect national sovereignty and autonomy, which are the guarantees of true freedoms. As an ancient civilization endowed with very ancient traditions of spiritual inquiry closely connected to the study of nature and life, which matured into the sciences of Ayurveda and Yoga, as well as several other traditional disciplines. India is an ideal meeting ground for pioneering researchers and experts in the field of consciousness studies. In relation with the quest for attaining and maintaining health and well-being in the mind and in the body of the individual and social level, the Ministry of Ayush is in charge of promoting and facilitating the preservation and cultivation of the various systems of medicine which have flourished in the Indian subcontinent since time immemorial. I may briefly mention some of our most relevant current activities. In 2021, we have taken various policy initiatives to promote Ayush system of medicine. The latest is the Ayushashtra Yojana, a new umbrella scheme that has been developed to roll out authentic classical Ayush intervention for promoting community health care and to provide support for establishment of Ayush medical health unit and reputed Ayush and allopathy institution. The Minister of State have already, in this case, mentioned. In 2020, the Department of Ayush, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, has launched the National Ayush Mission during the 12th National Economic Plan for implementation through state and union territories. The basic objective of NAM is to promote the Ayush medical system through cost-effective Ayush services, strengthen educational system, facilitate the enforcement of quality control of Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani and homeopathy, drugs and sustainable availability of Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani and Homeo raw materials. It envisages flexibility of implementations of the programs which will lead to sustainable participation of the state government and union territories. The NAM contemplates establishing a national mission as well as corresponding missions at the state level. To that end, NAM is likely to significantly improve the department outreach in terms of planning, supervision and monitoring this scheme. The Government of India has launched the National Mental Health Programs in 1982, keeping in view that heavy burden of mental illness in the community and inadequacy of mental health care infrastructure in the country to deal with. This has three components: treatment of the mentally ill, rehabilitation, prevention and promotions of positive mental health. All these programs in the area of healthcare can benefit from an improved scientific understanding of the mechanism of consciousness which impact the physical condition of human being as much as they determine their potential for intellectual and emotional development and blossoming, which are in turn keys to a happy and well-rounded personality. The various theories and experimental results achieved by the very eminent experts who have gathered for the conference will, I am sure, facilitate further progress in the endeavor, and I wish them a great success. So this is the kind of submission I had before you. And as you know, India, through its traditional system of medicine, got the special global recognition from the level of WHO. As you know, in the recent past, WHO, the strongest wings of UNO, health wing of UNO, who has established their first extension office in India, Jamnagar, Gujarat. I believe this is the tallest achievement on the part of the traditional system of medicine by the Indian in the global scenario. I believe you should all particularly glorify the stand we have achieved so far. I believe under the directive, particularly this achievement, we should all the time glorify, because we all know that India is rich in its traditional system of medicine for centuries together. But our practitioners, our healers, staying in the remotest part of the villages, they have been practicing for years, for centuries, but they didn't receive the recognition. But in the 21st centuries, under the visionary leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, because of his untiring effort, devoted effort, now India could able to achieve that target. Now India is the global leader in the sector of traditional medicine. So this is an opportunity for all of us, particularly for the young generation. I have a special appeal to them. Please come forward, take up the challenge, and prove we are the best. We are the best. We are the best in the world. So I believe whatever integrative system developed in this particular beautiful institution, NIMHANS. So this particular institution have developed the three systems together. That is allopathy, yoga and Ayurveda. This is the right way of proceeding, I believe. Because few moments back, Daji rightly mentioned the problem of ego, how it creates problem to the mankind. So I believe if all the systems work together and creating a better working relationship, developing a better understanding, that will definitely help us to develop a best possible mechanism to serve the mankind. And I must express my thankfulness to the director and all her teams, because they have all been working in the spirit of Team India. And this is the power we have, because in the spirit of this, if we all work together, excel to the best possible extent, then we can serve the global society with the sense of humanity, love and affection, with devotion, dedication, discipline and commitment. Because in this field of medical science, whether it is modern or traditional, in this field, the first qualification is required, that is to develop your love and affection to the mankind. And this is a kind of noble profession through which you could attain the best possible happiness of your life by rendering service to the mankind. So I believe, I always, Ram Madhavji, I think that we should develop the meaning of hospital. Hospital, I just telling our director and all the faculty members today and all the important leading head of the departments, let us develop a beautiful meaning of hospital. Hospital means happiness. Because when the patient suffer outside the hospital, when she or he just put inside with an expectation, now I'll be treated by none other than those souls which are pure and full of the heart of mankind. So I believe to that level we should promote this particular fraternity, because the people's expectations growing more and more, and this expectation we are to fulfill. How? This is what the method we should adopt, I believe. So with these few words, I'm really very, very happy, because respected Ram Madhavji communicated me and requested me to address this particular occasion. And all the members of this beautiful institution and also the India Foundation and all the commerce chambers from Karnataka, you have all been organizing. This is an international event, and respected scientists across the world, they are present here. They will definitely put forward their very, very important, valuable suggestion how to develop our better consciousness to lead a life of peace and tranquility, happiness, and also to lead a life of humanity. So I believe this is the challenges we are facing nowadays. Of course, I was just telling a few minutes back to some of the professors that, look, we have two challenges now. On the one hand, considering the present situation in the globe, the global warming, the climate change, which is creating tremendous threat to the existence of living organism on the planet Earth. That is why we have the biggest two challenges ahead of us. One, ecology and environment in presence of economic growth. And humanity in presence of advanced technology, growth of the advanced technology. How to maintain the balance between? We do not want to grow our economy at the cost of ecology and environment. In this particular sector, we'll have to put our special wisdom to make the balance. Of course, we'll grow economy along with the growth of ecology and environment for our comfortable survival. At the same time, humanity must stand tall in presence of the growing technology. So I believe this is a question before all of us, because this particular society, we have always been learning this particular principle. Man is a social animal, because we'll have to develop a society with better understanding, love and affection, mutual respect to each other. So with this particular principle, we'll have to live, but we'll have to grow. Technologically, we'll have to grow. Economically, we'll have to grow, but not at the cost of humanity, ecology and environment. With these few words, I extend my heartfelt greetings to all of you present here today. And really, we are delighted to have the leader like Narendra Modi ji, because of his visionary leadership, because of his dedicated and devoted leadership. Now India is growing faster, and India is seeing a lot of challenges in the different field of profession, and this transformation is only becoming possible because of his untiring effort, hard-working ability, and also his wisdom, knowledge and powers, and able leadership. And I believe because of his leadership nowadays, we both the system, modern and traditional, we are joining hand to each other. And Minister of Health and Family Welfare, Minister of Ayush, now we have determined to develop our integration. And through our integrated effort, we are to serve the nation, we are to serve the mankind. This is how we have been proceeding. And with these few words, I conclude. Dhanyavad, Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for an inspiring and thought-provoking inaugural address. May I now request Dr. Pratima Murthy, Director, NIMHANS, to deliver her address. Dr. Pratima Murthy, Director, National Institute of Mental Health Sciences, has over 3 decades of experience in the field of mental health. She has contributed to public policy in the fields of mental health, addictions, and integration of mental illness with non-communicable diseases, and many more. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening. Today's chief guest, Honorable Sarbananda Sonowal ji, Minister of Ayush, Government of India. Our keynote speaker, Shri Kamlesh Patel, Daji. Dr. Com Carpentier de Gourdon. Our health minister who couldn't be here today, Minister for Health and Medical Education, Government of Karnataka, Dr. Sudhakar should have been with us today, but he wasn't able to come. Dr. Prasad, our Registrar, Dr. Shankar Narayan Rao, Dr. Ramesh, the Vice Chancellor of the RGUHS, Dr. Nagaraja, the former Director of NIMHANS, Sri Ram Madhav, all my colleagues from NIMHANS, particularly the organizers of today's program, Dr. Bindu and Dr. Ravindra and the entire team, and the delegates of the Conference on Consciousness. Ladies and gentlemen, the first thing that strikes me is that there couldn't have been a better place for this conference other than NIMHANS. NIMHANS has a long tradition of looking at health in a holistic way, at exploring the mind from states of consciousness to the working of the brain in disease, looking at the brain through imaging, through electrophysiology, and a variety of other ways. And of course, trying to understand the mind, which is possibly the biggest enigma, and trying to help people to understand and to address how they can overcome distress and maintain equanimity in all situations. Our motto is Samatvam Yoga Uchyate, which is really about maintaining equanimity. And our long tradition, we are the first postgraduate department of psychiatry in the whole country. And we're going to start our Platinum Jubilee next year. We have the Golden Jubilee of NIMHANS next year, which is really the integration of mental health, neurological, and neurosurgical disorders. And we bring in so many specialties from basic neurosciences to behavioral sciences like psychiatry, psychology, nursing, social work, to the neurosciences. So we embrace this broad spectrum from health and illness, and possibly there can be no other place which integrates all these disciplines in such a seamless manner. So when Sri Ram Madhavji actually came to NIMHANS a few months ago and talked about this idea at that time, it seemed like an idea of trying to look at the challenges of the man-machine debate as far as consciousness was concerned. Little did I imagine how transformational this thought would be. He got in touch with Dr. Bindu Kuti, and between them, they've put this fantastic conference together. And the title of this conference itself, which is about exploring consciousness from a variety of vantage points and looking at the man-machine debate, I think is so contextual and so contemporary, because this really brings in so many centuries of traditional thinking about consciousness and how modern technology and the digital world actually alters our concepts, and how then can we rationalize the ideas of these two. We began today with that beautiful rendition by Dr. Shantala, which really talks about the various aspects of the mind and the struggle that the mind is constantly under to maintain a balance between the various pushes and pulls of the state of the chitta. Scientists, of course, have made huge strides in understanding of the brain in the last few decades. In fact, there was a decade of the brain where we hoped to find all the origins of disease, but sadly enough, we were left with more questions than answers about the causation of various kinds of disorders. However, it is no doubt that science and technology have made our lives certainly more comfortable and convenient. Developments in modern medicine have increased our lifespan. We are getting closer to sending people perhaps to Mars. But as far as understanding ourselves is concerned, we are still quite far in terms of learning about understanding our own experiences. That's such an irony, isn't it? While we can conquer the skies, when it comes to looking within ourselves, there is still so much that is left to understand. And the greatest aspect of our lives is our ability to feel and to experience, without which life has no meaning at all. And where does the focus of this experience lie? Daji told us about his experience of whether there is indeed a memory in inanimate surroundings. So I think these are all very intriguing questions. And at the end of the day, none of us would trade our subjective experience for any kind of value. This subjective or first-person experience we all have is referred to as consciousness from a Western perspective. But how does it arise? We all know that, from a scientific point of view, inputs go into the brain in the form of electromagnetic waves and vibrations in the air for sound and chemical molecules for smell and taste. But how does the brain magically transform these physical inputs into rich, vivid, colorful, three-dimensional, panoramic experiences of the outside world that we all experience, that we all savor from time to time? We have no answers yet for this. This is the hard problem of consciousness. How does neural activity give rise to experience? Which the Australian philosopher David Chalmers proposed. Philosophers and neuroscientists have been wrestling with this profound question for hundreds of years. Are we getting any closer to answering this? This is a question, and it's rhetorical. As technology progresses, there arises a question of whether it is possible that machines may become conscious. This presents various kinds of dilemmas, including ethical dilemmas. And the answer to this question bears huge implications in all aspects of our lives. I'm sure that the human-machine debate that's going to occur between Dr. Thomas Brophy, the president of the California Institute of Human Sciences from the United States, and Professor Kanchi Gopinath, the senior faculty from the Plaksha University, I would certainly throw some light on this very, very interesting debate. And of course, confusion is rife in consciousness research. Many different definitions exist, which makes our progress in understanding consciousness very challenging. From the Western perspective, consciousness means a subjective experience. Here, mind and consciousness are often used synonymously. However, from the Eastern perspective, the mind and the consciousness are different entities, and this conference will undoubtedly delve into these differences, provide a greater clarity, and help us to understand the nuances of this topic much better. We need to incorporate these different perspectives if we are going to get any closer to understanding this conundrum. In the conference, there is also a discussion on approaching consciousness from various perspectives as wide as neuroscience on the one hand, Sri Aurobindo, Patanjali, Vedanta, Jainism, and quantum physics. I'm pretty sure that an amalgamation of ideas from varied perspectives would make our understanding of consciousness much deeper. We all have a sense of self. How is this connected to the conscious experience? How is it altered in different states like creativity or dreaming? What role does attention play in conscious experience? Session 3 in the conference will provide some answers to these questions. Yoga and meditation provide ways of studying one's mind and the nature of consciousness. Different traditions explore this in a different way. We look at the inner exploration from an Advaita Vedanta and heartfulness tradition in another session. Meditation is also widely integrated nowadays with modern medicine. Our Honorable Minister just inaugurated the Center for Excellence in Integrated Medicine, and as he mentioned, it integrates allopathy with yoga and Ayurveda. What are the potential implications of such integration in clinical science? We know that meditation is also known to loosen up rigid identity and personality one carries while dissolving the sense of the individual self in the process. How is self-flexibility in meditators? Meditation also plays an important role in bringing about global transformation as one transforms individually. the world also transforms. How does it bring about this change? What are the mechanisms and the mediation of these processes? As well, the one extreme of consciousness is this. We also need to look at the other extreme, which is psychiatric conditions to truly understand consciousness. And we possibly will be deliberating these questions as well during other sessions of the conference. Finally, we will look at some intriguing questions like, is there a collective consciousness? The dual aspect monism in meditation, consciousness and quantum theory, and so on. And finally, we'll have some eternal questions being posed and tried to answer them, like the nature of reality, non-locality, the nature of the mind, and so on. Finally, we'll have a special address on the topic of meditation and the neuroscience of consciousness. There are many eminent speakers. It's actually wonderful if you've gone through the program. I'm sure many of you are very excited to really look at the plethora of very distinguished speakers that we have at this conference. It will not just be a great opportunity for scientists to discuss various aspects of consciousness, but for the young people who I hope will all participate in this conference to understand the complexities of not just the brain and the mind, but discussions around consciousness, and also take up future collaborative activities to understand the phenomenon of consciousness from a true, realistic, and multidimensional perspective. I want to express my thanks to Ram Madhavji for actually bringing us all together onto this platform, and for my colleagues for allowing such a lovely, set of discussions to occur in the next 2 or 3 days. It's certainly going to fill us with a lot more information, lot more introspection, and perhaps expand our own consciousness. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now this brings us to the felicitation ceremony. May I request the Director NIMHANS, Dr. Pratima Murthy, ma'am, to felicitate our chief guest, Sri Sonabalji. May I request Sri Kom Carpentier, Distinguished Fellow India Foundation, to felicitate the Director NIMHANS, Dr. Pratima Murthy. May I also request Dr. B.S. Shankar Narayan Rao, Registered NIMHANS, to felicitate Dr. I.S. Prasad, President, FKCCI. I request Kom Carpentier to felicitate Dr. Shankar Narayan Rao, Registrar NIMHANS. I also request Dr. I.S. Prasad.
Sir.
May I take this opportunity to express my appreciation to Dr. Shankar Narayan Rao, because he has been really very, very precious in his support he has given for the planning and organization of this conference. Thank you, sir.
This brings us to the end of the inaugural session, and to propose the word of thanks, I request Dr. I.S. Prasad, Registrar of NIMHANS, to deliver the address.
I'm not a registrar, KCC President.
I'm sorry.
I'm conscious. Good evening. I'll not take much time. Let me begin with talk about Ayurveda. It goes back to 3000 years. Ayur means life. Veda means knowledge of life. The consciousness, the inaugural keynote address by the Kamleshwar talks about the perception, the divine intervention. As president of FKCCI, it's nothing but the divine intervention through Ram Madhav sir, given opportunity for FKCCI to partner with the first international conference to understand, and also the Honorable Minister been talk about the economic growth is very important, but the ecology and environment is equally balanced. And he said very clearly that the human has to be grow beyond the technology grows. All the scientists coming from all over the world, in the 75th year of independence, Azad Ki Amrut Mahotsav, when our Prime Minister of India has declared that Amrut Kal, next 25 years for the young generation, sitting there, I think how we have taken 3,000 years to move out faster or more slower to make the machine or AI to overbeat the human. I think we must compliment the Ramadasar's India Foundation and all the organizations of India Foundation to think this the day is very important that we should also go back and understand what 3,000 years back. I think the Honorable Prime Minister of India has to be acknowledged. He has confidence in India. He has identified the Indian company to produce vaccination. Thereby we've been living today. I'm sure that this 75th year of independence, the next 25 years, all the scientists worldwide can learn, and this is a platform at NIMHANS been given. I'm very happy indeed. The scientists, the economists, and again the Minister of Ayush and Ayurveda coming together is the right platform. We want the economy move of $5 trillion. The economy ecologist wants to balance ecology. All the scientists wants to bring out the awareness of the life and conscious. Without much taking time, I bow my head and sincerely thank Ramadhav sir and all the organizers and extend warm and sincere thanks to our Honorable Minister, Sri Harbin Sarbanand Sonowal, talks about very clearly that consciousness has to be balanced economic growth of ecology. Sir, we extend sincere thanks to you for having come here and address the first international conference here. And also profusely thank the keynote address in absentia through virtual, Kamlesh D. Patel, for bringing the three dimension of the ego and mind and the consciousness, bringing awareness, the perception and the understanding. I feel today what is most important, all the joint families have become the individual families. I take this opportunity to extend thanks to Pratima Murthy, the Director of NIMHANS, Shankar Narayan sir, and again all the participants and scientists. This 3 days conference will benefit, bring awareness, let this India progress towards understanding the life of consciousness. Thank you very much and have a good deliberation next 3 days, and be happy to partner with NIMHANS forever. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This concludes the conference, the inaugural session. I request all of you to be seated as the minister will be ushered out. He has to catch a flight. We have an announcement. We will begin with the next session, which is the most awaited man-machine debate. I request all of you to remain seated as we change the dais. We also have an announcement for all of you. Sri Ram Madhav, the founder and member of Board of Governors of India Foundation, has recently written a book titled Partitioned Freedom. It is a historical review of the events that led to India's dramatic partition and the causes behind these events, which are objectively explained with documents and first-person testimonies in the book. So those of you who are interested, they're available outside. The book is scheduled to be officially launched tomorrow, but we have made some copies available for those of you that will be interested. Thank you.
Good evening to all present here. We will now begin with the much-awaited man-machine debate. I would like to welcome the moderator for this event, Mr. Com Carpenter de Gordon, Distinguished Fellow, India Foundation, to the dais. Mr. Carpenter will be the moderator for this debate today. He is presently the convener of the editorial board at the World Affairs Journal and author of various books, several articles, essays, and papers. I would also like to welcome the speakers of the debate, Dr. Thomas Brophy, President, California Institute of Human Science, and Professor Kanchi Gopinath, Senior Faculty, Paksha University, to the dais. Dr. Brophy's academic and scientific backgrounds include work on NASA's Voyager and Cassini spacecraft projects, and an appointment as a National Science Foundation Exchange Scientist at the University of Tokyo. He is the recipient of Motoyama Bento Fellowship. He received an immersive education into Dr. Motoyama's subtle energies research and his advanced meditation techniques, while simultaneously conducting his own scientific research applying photoelectric mode. Professor Kanchi Gopinath is currently a senior professor at Paksha University after retirement from Indian Institute of Science in 2021. His research interests are primarily in the computer systems area. He is a co-author of a recently published book on resource proportional software design for emerging systems. With all the participants present, I will now hand over the session to our moderator, Mr. Carpenter. Sir, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Is it clear? All right. So, welcome to the two panelists, and welcome to you all for the continuation of this inaugural session. I would first, of course, refer to what has been said about the rise of the machines, you know, to take the title of the famous science fiction film, and how they are invading our reality. And I refer to the work of an American philosopher who said, Baslich, who wrote that we are living through the break of the solution of the fourth discontinuity, the first being the Copernican one, the second being the Darwinian one, the third one being the Freudian one, and the fourth, which is the blurring of distinction between man and machine, or between humans and things made by us. So with this very brief introduction, I will go in alphabetical order, and I will request Professor Brophy we want to keep this free going, I mean, sort of free-flowing, because we did have some earlier discussions and we exchanged a lot of writings. So we will try to keep it spontaneous. And so I will request both of the speakers to give us a 7 to 8 minute initial presentation of their views with regard to fairly general questions which I will ask them, and then there will be an interaction, and afterwards we can open it to the other speakers at the conference and eventually to the public. So, Professor Brophy, how do you see nowadays the philosophy behind the creation of machines that are equipped with artificial intelligence and very soon with quantum computing abilities? Do you think that this is a sort of mimicking of the human mental abilities, or in the sense that it is essentially a copy, but it doesn't go beyond instilling data and then having machines learn how to use this data, but without any thinking of their own? Or do you think that machines can indeed acquire intelligence, because if intelligence is, might say, all over the universe, it is literally pervading the universe, then can machines essentially be equipped in such a way that they can capture it just like we do?
Okay, is this working? Yes. Thank you so much, Kome. And a quick thank you to the India Foundation and NIMHANS for organizing this really extraordinary conference. I hope it will be the first of many and a regular event going forward. Because in my view, this effort to bring consciousness into our scientific understanding of the nature of reality is the most important unsolved scientific problem of our time. So I'm really pleased to be here, and I was very appreciative of the talks that went earlier. I prepared just 3 quick slides to give us a sort of a visual outline to help the concepts that I'm going to talk about. Can we start with the first one?
I think we're having a slight delay, but the slides are there, so they will come up at any moment.
There, okay.
There we go.
6 years ago, AlphaGo, a computer, robot, crushed the greatest Go player of all time, Lee Sedol, in a much publicized event, a Go match. Go is a game that's both more simple and more complicated than chess. Go involves intuition and elegance to play well. 25 years ago, when the IBM computer Deep Blue beat the world chess champion, Garry Kasparov, those of us who play these games as a hobby, we hoped that Go might be so complex that, because at that time Go computers were very bad. I could beat them all. And we hoped that the game of Go would be so complex and involve intuition that it would be a very long time for computers would beat the best Go players, best human Go players, and maybe never. But then it happened 6 years ago, faster than a lot of us thought and hoped. But it didn't destroy the game of Go like a lot of people thought. It ended up that humans now, the top human players, they learn from the Go robots. AlphaGo, it was a machine learning neural network algorithm, and it learned how to play. It learned by playing humans first, and then by playing versions of itself to get even better than humans. And now humans learn from the Go computers, the Go robots, they're learning strategies of Go that humans playing alone may never have gotten to, or it might have taken thousands of years. But this combination has accelerated the game of Go for humans as well. So this, and there are gaming robots in other fields as well, like online poker, and they do very well there too, and they win a lot of money off of the human players. So in this area, these gaming computers, they pass a sort of Turing test. When you play them online, you can't tell whether you're playing a human or a robot. So they are very domain smart, almost, well, essentially transhuman in a way. Humans now learn entirely new types of strategies from them. But is AlphaGo conscious? Is AlphaGo conscious? So in the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about what consciousness is. And slide number 2, please. So on the flight out here from California, I reread Swami Vivekananda's lectures or speeches in the United States in the 1890s, starting with the great World Parliament of Religions in 1893. And okay, I'm going to talk about this slide very humbly, given where I'm at. And this is what I take from Swami Vivekananda's expositions on the Vedic ontology of consciousness. And he was speaking to Americans, so he's probably giving the Vedanta for Dummies version. So take that with a grain of salt. But this is what I got out of his model of the ontology of consciousness, the Vedic ontology of consciousness. You have Atman, the oversoul, the unitary soul that precipitates out what the illusion of our separated souls and that experience mind, consciousness, and then that interacts with the body, brain, action and perceptions, the physical body. And that's in the Vedic terminology is the world of Maya, which is also the world of science, the empirical science. But the problem was in the 1890s, the foundations of science were classical physics, pre-modern physics. And the pre-modern physics suggested, of the world of science at the time, suggested that the world of physics, the physical universe, was causally closed. So there couldn't be any connection between the physical body and the kind of consciousness body that Vedic ontology talks about. So that was a rift there, and even today, many theorists of biological theorists and neuroscientists still hold to this notion that the physical universe must be causally closed, and therefore consciousness cannot have any causal effect in human bodies or brains. But actually, in the 1920s, modern physics was discovered, based on quantum physics, was discovered to be the foundation of modern science. And with modern physics, with the quantum physics, that created a causal opening in the structure of physical universe, such that there is a possibility that the consciousness bodies could interact with the physical body and the brain, physical brain. And so I see this as the route forward to reunifying the Vedic view of the ontology of consciousness with the modern scientific view of the physics of the physical universe. And on this view, and then in this reunified view, you can then make sense of things like that painting by Alex Gray, which shows the physical body together with the subtle bodies. And the Daji speaker earlier today talked about the subtle bodies of the human being and how it interacts with the physical body and with consciousness. And so on this reunified view, that's possible to happen now. So I see that as the way forward. But it's important that it's a unification at a higher level that includes modern physics with the ancient Vedic wisdom. It's not a regression to either pre-modern Vedic view or pre-modern physics. So then on the third slide, what about machine consciousness? So third slide, thank you. So I just described the Vedic ontology of quantum living being consciousness because it only applies in the biological beings and in the entities that connect with the quantum level. If you're entirely governed only by classical physics, it can't work. The Vedic ontology can't work. but it can in the modern physics. And so then what is the ontology of machine, artificial intelligence, consciousness? Well, the Atman level, it applies to all of reality, so it would be there too in our analysis of machine, artificial intelligence, consciousness. But is there then some kind of machine souls or machine subtle body level that interacts with a mind level and the machine physical operations? So on this view, classical computing, artificial intelligence, like classical physics, biology, cannot be conscious. Or on the panpsychist view of consciousness, which is really taking over now, it has only the most fundamental level, like consciousness of a rock. And even AlphaGo, as extraordinary as it is and as powerful as it is purely classical computing. So on this view, even AlphaGo wouldn't have a kind of consciousness. But quantum computing AI, like quantum biology, can have consciousness on this view. And there's a picture there of Hartmut Nevin, the engineering director of Google's quantum artificial intelligence laboratory, with the Google quantum computer. And in a talk I was with Mark Hartmut recently, he said that device is starting to demonstrate something called Knightian freedom. Knightian freedom or Knightian uncertainty is a concept that came originally from economics for systems that become so complicated or are so complicated that they're not predictable even probabilistically. And these quantum computers potentially can become Knightian free in that sense. So what would a Knightian free artificial intelligence machine do or be like? A device that that is unpredictable obviously brings up all sorts of new questions related to commercializations.
Thank you. I will pick up there because we can come back on some of those fascinating concepts. You have answered the question in a very detailed way and very well supported. Now, I would request Professor Kanchi Gopinath, as a Sanskritist as well as a computer scientist, to tell us, in his perspective, what is the contribution that Indian traditional thought, beginning with the very logic and the very structure of Sanskrit, going into the various aspects of philosophy, not only the highly intellectual ones, but also the popular literature, you know, where you see artificial intelligence, computers, and robots back in the ancient Indian text, like Brihad Katha and several others, you know, in Buddhist, in Buddhist sutras as well. So thousands of years ago, you had an interest and a speculation, at least, into what intelligent machines would be like and how they behaved, and they are described sometimes in great detail. So, Professor Gopinath, give us your insight from your long experience in this field, both in science and in ancient philosophy.
Yeah. Thank you, Kumar Carpenter. Thank you. I should mention that at the outside, I am a professor in computer science. I was a professor, I'm still a professor in computer science. I was a professor at Indian Institute of Science, and then I'm currently a professor at Praksha University. So I'm coming from a computational perspective. So let me just mention what I mean by that. I think there are multiple perspectives. I can have a Indian perspective, Indic perspective. I can have a computational perspective possibly. I can have a quantum physical systems kind of perspective. I can also have, let us say, a self-organizing systems kind of perspective. Okay, the multiple perspectives possible. I will touch upon a few of them. I don't think I can, there's enough time to go through all of them. Let me just mention that the Indian conception of let's say, reality or the mind, etc., is quite deep. For example, you have the notion of jnanendriyas and karmendriyas. Basically, you might think of it as input-output devices. And then you have what is called chitta, which is basically, of course, there are multiple definitions, but one definition of that is that it's storage. Basically, just like in a computer, you have input-output and also storage. And then there is this manas, which is basically the I/O controller, which manages all these jnanendriyas and karmendriyas. And then you have ahamkara, which is basically the thread of execution in a computer. And then you have this buddhi, which is the integrity facility. You can also map it to consciousness, for example. So that is one kind of model. And you notice that if you look at jnanendriyas, basically the ability to smell, touch, etc., in current artificial intelligence or deep learning kind of models, it turns out those problems are quite well handled by what is called deep learning. For example, I can give a picture and then multiple pictures and ask it after training whether it can recognize it, or even some slightly different versions of the same. Okay? And you're able to do it, and this is basically the ability to, let us say, sense vision or speech and touch and those kind of things. This is basically done through deep learning. And so here I think it has worked beautifully. Basically there's some kind of inputs and there's an association with an output. If you look at the even the more phenomenally successful language models, for example, what are called large language models. For example, you might have heard of something called GPT-3 and some other kind of models. It turns out they are extremely good, and they can actually in real time translate somebody speaking in English to Chinese, for example. It has been demonstrated. Okay? But one thing about this kind of models is that they are essentially don't have memory. Almost you might say that after looking at some piece of text, they forget exactly the context. So in some sense, even though they're extremely good, they are amnesiacs in some sense. Okay? They are not able to recollect. So future models of these large language models, for example, need to have certain element of long-term memory, which is absent right now in LLM models, in large language models. Similarly, they don't have a notion of goals. For example, it was mentioned about AlphaGo. It has a certain notion of goals. It uses something called reinforcement learning, some other kind of models. It turns out these large language models don't have this notion also. Okay, so that is another big issue of that kind. Another bigger problem could be that if you look at these, let us say, large language models which understand speech, connected speech, like what I'm doing, for example, right now, the real problem is that they don't really interact with the real world. And because they don't interact with the real world, their understanding of the real situation in the world is actually limited. And so I think that's one thing which is also seriously lacking. And I think that's something which has to be done. The one issue is that in spite of the limitations I mentioned, they're phenomenally successful in understanding speech, translating, they're able to recognize faces, all kinds of things they're able to do. But they also expend a lot of energy. And basically, you'll notice that it uses very large computational powers. And because of that, if you extrapolate the current needs for doing even larger scale projects that requires ability to interact with the real world, the computational burden on those systems is going to be dramatically very high, and it's not even clear that long term we can actually afford those things. Actually, I will probably expand on this a bit more later if time permits. And so I think that when you think about some of these things, in the context of consciousness, one thing that strikes me is that in India, we have this notion of rasa theory. For example, in Bharata, in Natya Shastra, he comes up with a beautiful model of a two-level model of bhavas and rasas. And he has a certain interesting model that recurrent bhavas become rasas. Basically, he has some notion about 56 bhavas. You can think of it as emotions. And then that becomes transformed through certain process, into rasas, about 9 rasas. And I feel that this rasas gives me a sense of what it could mean to have that sense of integrative consciousness that, for example, our Indian texts, for example, talk about. The aspect about Brahman, for example. So the rasa as a stepping stone as to understand this aspect, I think is quite interesting to me, especially because it also has in a, let us say, mathematical sense, what I would call a control theoretic model. Basically, the fact that it has to be a recurrent phenomenon, and therefore it becomes, let us say, it becomes Thai bhavas. Basically, in some sense, it stays for longer periods of time. And so there's a beautiful model in Bharata's Natya Shastra, and I think that could be an interesting stepping stone to understand what our Indian texts talk about, as I mentioned, what from Atman, you go to Brahman, for example. What exactly is involved in this kind of transition? And so I think there are a lot more other interesting things I can talk about, but I think for the time being, I'll stop here and let Kome ask me a few other questions, or the audience, and then we can respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I will ask to you both a very short question, and I'll let you answer from your different perspectives. Dr. Brophy, you have been, essentially you are based in California, which is the seedbed of a lot of the technology that is taking over the world, and you also have a deep connection with Japan and with the mystical approach to science that certain Japanese scientists have, including your, if I might say, your teacher, Motoyama. And I wonder if, and of course this is addressed to Dr. Kanchi Gopinath, but if you would answer first. We would expect California, because of its advanced contribution to humanity in this field, to have achieved a certain kind of balanced society. And yet we are seeing probably the opposite. I mean, there is a tremendous deterioration of the social, political, and economic environment in California, and the enormous inequality that has been spawned, economic inequality and social inequality that has been spawned by advanced technologies, which have created huge fortunes in very few years, while apparently not doing anything to help the poorer classes of society, which seem to be sinking ever deeper into destitution. How would you see the impact of the new technologies, particularly computers and what comes after? And do you think that we could be living in a dystopian world of the type that we see in some movies like, Minority Report? Or do you think these technologies will lead to a resolution of the current problems that affect highly technological societies?
Who's
you
first?
I think, and then unless you want, but I think you first. You are directly concerned. He will give us the Indian view of it.
Okay, that's a great question. What first comes to mind is actually our first speaker, Daji, talking about consciousness, and these technologies that many of them are developed in California, like AlphaGo, they are great at intelligence, but they aren't even close to consciousness yet. And they are developed for particular purposes, usually commercial purposes or military purposes, and they aren't developed with sustainable global society in mind. These technologies obviously can be very powerful. So if they are developed with sustainable global society development, conscious sustainable global society development in mind, they could be a great help for that. But they aren't close, on my view, to being what operating in a way that we call and we experience as conscious.
I would, Doctor, I will make a slight sort of adjustment to the question addressed to you, Dr. Gopinath. From the Indian perspective, knowing that India is becoming a great power in these new technologies and will be certainly a world leader in the coming few years, how would you see the way in which India could shape those technologies and develop them in such a way as to make a positive contribution to society and worldwide, while avoiding some of the pitfalls that have actually, affected very advanced, technologically advanced societies nowadays.
Yeah. Thanks for this great question. I think that if you look at the recent Indian experience, especially, for example, we had this COVID as a big blight on our country and many other countries. I think the way India handled it, I think, is a good example of the integrative intelligence of the current way of doing things in some sense. Basically because we had about 1.4 billion people, and we had to vaccinate them, and we had to do it in a very fast, in a very small amount of time. And I think we had sufficient digital infrastructure that is already in place, which I think is helping us to cope with this problem. And I think that in the future, if a similar, let us say, compassionate perspective with respect to, because, for example, in our country, as of almost everybody got this vaccination free of cost. I think that if such a perspective is available in the future going forward, I think that what we call, for example, in Shastra, in Indian Shastras, we say that when you study a Shastra, we need to have what is called a prayojana. Why is it that we are doing this? Okay? And if this prayojana aspect of AI is clearly understood, then there is a good possibility, just like we were able to handle the vaccination challenge, the development of vaccines, as well as the actually vaccinating all the people, I think we can probably have a certain, let's say, good chance of handling the problem. Okay. I think that my own thinking is that AI is certainly a very powerful technology, but it is an extremely energy consuming technology. And I think that as of now, human beings are better at handling the variety of situations we find ourselves in. And actually there have been some interesting extrapolations. In Semiconductor Research Association in US, for example, they actually said, suppose we are increasing the number of digital, let us say, let's call it transitions from 0 to 1, 0 to 1, because when you do a cell phone or whatever, right, we do a lot of zeros and ones going. Suppose you compute the number of all the transitions between 0 and 1, and we extrapolate what is currently the situation right now, and to 2040, for example. Their computations show that if you were to go at the same rate what we are doing right now, you will exhaust all the energy available right now, available to whole of the earth right now. But basically, it is completely unsustainable. So now I'm talking about AI, which is now an extremely energy demanding application, and therefore, I think the possibility that you will do this on a very, very large scale is somewhat difficult. Basically, the reason is that currently, from a device physics point of view, it turns out that if you take a switching circuit, we are about 10 or 12 orders of magnitude less efficient than what the device physics allows us. Okay? You need to cross those barriers, and even then, I think there is a good chance that we will consume a good part of the energy. As of now, for example, electronics alone consumes about 2% of the energy consumption. So if somebody says that I'm going to increase AI penetration by some huge number, it's going to, unless there is some other counteracting aspects, it's going to pull out lots of energy out from the system, which is not going to be sustainable. So I don't think large populations can afford this expensive AI technology unless some dramatically unusual things happen. Probably quantum computing can do it, I don't know. But other things, there might have a lot of other things that have to come into the picture. As of now, to me, there's a big problem of making AI. For example, I mentioned about these large language models available on every cell phone. I think part of it is possible, but some other things may not be that easily possible. So I think there's still a lot of scope for large groups of people doing something interesting, not just leave it to the, let's say, the AI part of it. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point about the energy consumption and limitation there. And I think that relates to the point about the quantum level connection being the key to how consciousness operates in an entity. And it may be that biological entities evolved with such complexity, and the human brain is really extraordinary biological evolution. If it really does operate connected to the quantum level, that's probably the most efficient, energy efficient way to do that sort of thing. And so doing it this kind of brute force way is going to be vastly limited by energy and other types of limitations.
Can I say something at this point? Yeah. Actually, it turns out, a beautiful point. I think basically it turns out, for example, if you look at chlorophyll, it uses some quantum phenomena of some electron transfer, okay, and that is extremely efficient. And there is almost no other mechanism known which is as good as that when it comes to transforming sunlight into, let us say, our food, for example. And I think that we need, some such amazing, let us say, developments, so that we are not demanding too much energy from what already we are in serious energy crisis as of now, okay, and demanding large-scale computing systems which require even more power. I think, for example, if you look at the increase in the size of the models, you used to have something like a model of the size of 10 to the power of 6 about 4 or 5 years back. Now it is almost 10 to the power of 12, and things like that. So basically, the models have become bigger and bigger. And so there has to be some other way in which we can handle the needs of computation. If that can be handled, I think it's feasible. But looks like from the switching point of view, just the most basic device physics point of view, the number of switchings that you can do, that itself will limit what kind of AI is possible in the future. And that can actually relate to some of the problems you mentioned, that there could be societies with a lot more AI capability, just like societies with a lot more energy capacity, and societies with less energy capacity. There could be certain issues with respect to how people divide up that, you might say, energy/switching capacity across nations, across communities. That can be actually an interesting, let us say, way in which things can actually, let us say, I should say, the system, the trajectory of the, let's say, the power relationship between different groups of people. That is a possibility.
Well, energy is definitely the key problem, and we know that new sources of energy are needed and new concepts of energy which will not come without a new physics, as many scientists are now acknowledging. We have Don Hoffman in the field of life sciences, but we have people who are purely in the physics field, like Salvatore Pais, who definitely are working on San Diego on completely revolutionary energy technologies, which rely on a totally different concept of, I would say, reality. This being said, I will ask you as a sort of final question, because before we throw it open, it's more of it's a provocative question. How, basically, you see, when you brought the very notion of the ability of computer systems to help us in every way and to plan things, there is the issue of control. I mean, control over humans. And that's become very acute during the COVID crisis, because in some countries, I could mention China, but Western countries went the same way. The control over people became stifling, and it became tyrannical, arbitrary, and a lot of it was actually dictated by computer models, which turned out in most cases to be wrong. And people were basically behaving by what they were told by their models, and they were no longer listening to experienced physicians. The computers were allied with the pharma companies, and together they dictated policy. Now, China, as you know, has appointed a computer as CEO of one of its companies now. Ms. Tang Yu is the new CEO of a large Chinese company, and this is the way of the future. So we are not talking about human beings being helped by computers, or even merging with computers, but human beings being essentially under the authority of computers. Now, how do you see that happening? How do you think we can prevent that? You know, what the Chinese have experimented with digital currencies, and we are going the same way, which means your currency can be withdrawn from you if the state has some, opinion about you which is not favorable. So you can see all those things on the horizon, not in 20 years, but probably in the next 3-4 years. How would you react to that? You can choose who wants to speak first. I mean,
I can go first. Yeah. Well, I think one way to prevent it, this is going to come from my perspective as a fundamental scientist. So awareness of this fundamental science of consciousness, and that all these technologies, they're still classical computing, and I think when we make progress in understanding what consciousness really is and incorporate it into our model of reality, then we'll see that these computers are still classical computers, and we would understand why we wouldn't want them to be our CEOs. And in this, when we find out what consciousness really is and how it operates in the world, we'll understand things like the two earlier speakers, like Daji and the NIMHANS director mentioned. Is there such thing as a consciousness of a place, a location, or non-local interactions, non-local consciousness operating possibilities? And there may be an entirely new fields of endeavors and new types of science that can address these problems in an entirely new way involving consciousness. So that's my thought.
Yeah. I think from an Indian perspective, I think that this, in India, for example, we extol people who are renunciates, people who don't, gather too many things. And Atmarata means you are happy in your own self. You don't have to depend on outside things. I think that's a powerful model, I think, for withstanding the kind of things you mentioned. For example, advertising, right? The people sending you barrages of information about buy this, buy that, etc. The thing is, if you are if you are Atmarata, that means you can enjoy yourself without having external inputs. Okay? Then I think you don't need those kind of, and that's one powerful way in which you can counter this phenomenon of external inputs driving your behavior. Okay? And I think that similarly, for example, there's going to be a lot of misinformation because we are in perilous situations, perilous times where lots of, for example, wars and other things are happening, COVID and other things are happening. So it's going to be a lot of misinformation. And I think that if we are self-contained in some sense, okay, and which is basically the one of the things that our Indian thought systems have pushed very hard, okay, and Gandhi is a good example of that one. I think that probably there is a way to, let us say, be happy and not be seduced by attractive things. It look good on the outside, but they're not really good inside. Okay, so I think AI could be a great example of a technology which, if used wisely, can do wonders, but it's unlikely to be that simple a case. So I think if we develop that vaccination against these temptations, I think we are going to be in a good shape. And I hope that this Indian perspective or the Indic perspective, Eastern perspective, I'm pretty sure that similar perspective exists in the Western world also. I think those kind of perspectives, they become prominent, I think we are in a better shape than otherwise, I think.
Thank you very much. I think we can now open it for a few questions or comments. I would perhaps first invite the other speakers at this conference if they have any particular comment or question. So I think Professor Hankey, first floor, and then, first row, and then Swamiji, Swami Narasimhanandaji. Can we, mic? You can use mine.
I was very interested by Dr. Gopinath's statement that his computer translation system could translate anything. So I'm going to quote you one of the most favorite poems in the English language, which is universally loved by adults and by children. And I wonder if you could, your machine could translate it. The first verse goes, it's called Jabberwocky. 'Twas brillig in the slithy toves, did gar and gimble in the wave, or mimsy with the borough groves and the mome raths outgrabe. I might add that humans can translate it.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the claim is that it's certainly an interesting poem and a fascinating poem. The claim in the AI kind of camp would be that if you give enough examples of this kind of poems, you could certainly figure it out. Okay? It is agreed that one shot that is given the first time, it may not be able to make any sense. But if you give about 100 or 200 or probably 1,000 samples, and with a certain approximate idea what it could mean, certainly it will, the claim is that it can do it. Okay? And it has been shown in many other disparate circumstances that it can do some of those kind of translations.
Thank you for the presentation, wonderful presentation by both Professor Gopinath and Brophy. You were mentioning Swami Vivekananda's thoughts, basically Advaita Vedanta philosophy. So there when he refers to Atman, he is not talking about a super body. He is talking about consciousness called Chitta, as you might be aware, which is beyond body, space and time. And you mentioned about the pre-modern physics, classical physics and quantum physics. I was wondering if quantum physics can reach out to a avenue of exploration where you can go beyond body, beyond any context in space, time. Is that even possible till now in whatever quantum physics has thought about?
Thanks. That's a great question. And actually, it's required. So, quantum phenomenon, if there is a process involving the collapse of the quantum wave function of biology in the brain, for example, and it's known that quantum collapse processes involving entanglement necessarily operate across space and time. So quantum-based mechanisms and processes necessarily have a trans-temporal and trans-spatial aspect to how they operate. And that's part of why the eventual science that will explain how consciousness works, if it does work through the quantum level, is going to be very complicated. Now, complicated isn't quite the right word, but it's going to be radically different than physics is today as we know it now.
So here's it.
Yeah, actually mine is a follow-up to what the Buddhist gentleman said about something beyond space and time. We started this with the quote from Adi Shankaracharya. We are now talking about Vivekananda. We have an author called K.M. Munshi, and he's written a number of books called the Book of Yudhishthira, the Book of Bhima, the Book of Arjuna. In the Book of Yudhishthira, he very clearly mentions that Yudhishthira has what is known as out-of-body experiences. So he is able to project his consciousness outside his body and go and view things, etc., etc. This ties in very nicely with you gentlemen. You were discussing energy systems and how energy-intensive AI systems can be. Here is a low energy system, which does not make use of machines, but makes use of the body and makes use of consciousness to project consciousness outside the body as a low energy system. Thank you.
I'll give you a threshold test for the issue of our computer, whether quantum or otherwise conscious. We know that all consciousness is interconnected and interdependent. We know this. I'm an experimentalist, so this is all from experimental work. The question that I would ask, or the challenge that I think could be made, is if we know that all life forms have consciousness that is interconnected and interdependent, and we know, for instance, just to give you an experiment, we know, for instance, that Gene Ochterberg's study, there are hundreds of these, but as an example, where Kahuna priests were focusing healing on recipients that were in MRIs, and there was a light bulb in front of them, and when the light bulb came on, they focused on their healing intention, and when the light bulb went off, they quit. And the people who were in the fMRIs, who were the recipients, their brain function changed only during the time that the kahunas were focusing intention, but not otherwise, demonstrating this connection. And so the question, the threshold test that I would propose to you is, when a computer can hold the intention to produce a specific biological effect non-locally, it will be conscious. Because in order to do that, you have to enter the non-local domain of consciousness. A Turing test, if you will. When a computer can create a non-local perception or perturbation effect, holding an intention under randomly controlled triple-blind conditions, and a living being responds to that non-local connection, you have a conscious computer.
But how do you know what the intention of the computer is?
It doesn't matter. What you have to know is that the computer says that it is holding an intention, just as the Kahuna priests held the intention for healing for people that they didn't know. They're in one part of the world and the recipients are in another part. And when the light bulb went on, they held intention, and when the light bulb went off, they didn't. And that was controlled by a random number generator, so it was completely triple blind. And only when the recipients were the focus of that intention did their brain function in the prefrontal cortex react. And when that kind of threshold could be reached, you would have to have, by definition, a conscious computer.
So can I hear, sir? Left side, right side, in fact. Hello? Sir?
So close. In space. You bring a very nice point up here. Because what is this delay? It's a time scale. So you delay your intention despite you have an input. Yeah? And maybe that intention may be beneficial to delay later in a different context. So for that your agent needs a certain different times of time scale. It needs. You cannot delay the intention otherwise. If you argue with it, but it doesn't matter. But I think what is important here for
That's not correct. When the time linkage is exactly the same. When they hold the intention, the recipient responds. When they stop the intention, the recipient doesn't respond, and they are exactly time coordinated.
You need, as the organism, you need an internal time scale to delay the response. to delay the response, you need a shorter and a longer time scale. You delay your response maybe 15 seconds. I delay my response
1 hour.
Shorter. Okay, it's not, but I want to make another point which is linked to that. You both pointed out that the problem of the current AI, it's not adaptive, yeah, or marginally adaptive. And I would say, what do you need to be adaptive? You need to react to different time scales. Just listening to music. You have an abundance of different time scales, short and long. You have a shorter, and you need to stochastically match with these time scales, and that makes you adaptive. And that makes you a synchrony, an experience of synchronization, which I often heard here from meditators here. And I think that alignment, as I like to call, or synchronization, is really lacking in the current AI. Maybe what you said, the entanglement, the trans-temporal spatial entanglement, might offer an option for that. And we were discussing here, he was asking, going beyond time and space. You answered with trans-temporal and trans-spatial. But that still implies, conceptually, still time and space. And that would probably not address his question of going beyond. It doesn't mean that I agree with him. We discussed that. But I think it's a very important thing. And that's where I think we need to go into phenomenology. And then we need to see subtle differences in phenomenology, how we can implement them in our design and what is needed. Yeah? And from my point of view, that's my personal point of view, the different time scales are a key. Not only the time scales of the brain, also the time scales of the environment, the different time scales. Yeah? So that's...
Excuse me. My question is that the existing energies are getting exhausted, and at some point of time we may find it very difficult to get either fossil energies or any other energies. There is also some kind of thought process going on that sound is going to be in future used as a main source of non-polluting energy, and some of the spiritual leaders in India are referring to various Vedic texts and all that, where sound can be used as an additional source of energy in future. If Dr. Gopinath can give me some idea on that, it will clarify my doubt.
Okay. Hello? Yeah. I think my understanding of use of sound, pranava for example, right? This Om, I think it's more about setting up oscillatory circuits in your brain. I would say, to put it in a simple way. Okay. I think it is basically, if you look at all the interesting theories, there is some recurrence in it somewhere. For example, you look at, I mentioned the rasa theory in Bhava, right? Rasa and Bhavas. Recurrent Bhavas become rasas. Okay? Similarly, in neuroscience, people talk about the fact that when there are oscillations set up, then there is possibility of memory, for example, right? The various other, and you'll also see this in other disciplines also. When you find that to get stability, you need to have a sort of repetition. I think the sound energy, what you're mentioning, I think it's some kind of subtle energy that can be incorporated into our minds, and then certain, let us say, circuits are, let us say, we keep it going in motion, and that basically helps us to reach a different altered state of consciousness, I suppose. Okay? And I think, for example, even when you do this Brahmari and those kind of meditation, you'll find that this is something we experience, right? When we do that meditation, you sense something different. So I think it's more, I think, input to get started rather than the thing itself. That's what I would say.
Sir, regarding the...
Yeah, actually I have a question that once, suppose our machines become so good like MRIs, electrophysiology, that we capture one day the spatiotemporal variability of consciousness. like the neural signature. And then we have, suppose, captured the inter-individual variability of consciousness across several people. Can we really come to a joint consciousness, what we say as conscious computers or conscious machines? Can we replicate that consciousness ever? Because in deep learning, in machine learning, that's the concept, right? We are making the things learn. And suppose once we have this neural signature being replicated, that we know that there's a conscious signature in the brain, or in the body, or anything, can we make a conscious computer? Because can we come to that joint consciousness capability of the machines ever?
Can I respond to this? Can I respond to this? Yeah. I think that my own understanding is that unless that you have embodiment of consciousness, ability to interact with the real world is going to be limited. And I think the very act of embodiment itself creates its own, let us say, I would say, I wouldn't call it difficulties. It circumscribes what is possible. Okay. So I think that's why I don't think it is possible to expand in unlimited number of ways. So there is always be some limit somewhere, because there is either, because unless you interact with other parties, you don't really, your levels of intelligence also doesn't grow up. For example, if you look at AlphaGo, etc., it played against itself. You keep doing it multiple times, then you start developing something. Because basically, you need a certain ability to interact with other parties somehow. Okay? And that's why, for example, in our, we say, vade, vade, jayate, buddha. I mean, basically, you keep debates, then you get buddhi. Okay? So that without that debates, without that interaction with other parties with similar capabilities, you don't really benefit. So I think, but unfortunately, you need that embodiment somehow. Because otherwise, you won't be able to interact with the real world. If you are just purely ethereal, that ability to interact with the real world, at least to my understanding, is limited. Okay? So that doesn't really help us. Okay.
Yes, that's why they say that disembodied beings envy embodied beings like humans. I'll ask Professor Brophy perhaps to make say a final word, if he has any comment before we close.
Sure, one quick comment actually on the last question. In my view, consciousness is everywhere. So the question is really, will machines ever exhibit consciousness similar to biology? And I think machines will eventually have some kind of a more complex consciousness, but there'll be machine consciousness. Because I think biology has evolved to be biological consciousness, and so for a machine to be like biological consciousness, it'd have to be physically like biology. But I do think a new kind of machine consciousness will eventually develop.
Yes, a biological machine eventually. That's coming. That's around the corner. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it was a fascinating debate, and we got, in a short period of time, we got a number of insights from both East and West about where we are going with this new technology. So I will now essentially request our friends at India Foundation at NIMHANS to felicitate the speakers. And I wish you otherwise a good evening, and we will, of course, for many of us, meet tomorrow for the continuation of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My thanks too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brophy, Professor Kanchi, for this informative session, and Mr. Carpenter for bringing this debate together. I would request Mr. Carpenter to present the memento to Dr. Thomas Brophy. And Professor Gopinath Kanchi. We thank our esteemed guests once again. And with that, we conclude the man-machine debate for the evening. There is another announcement. The VIPs and the speakers can please proceed to the guest house next door for dinner. For the faculty members and delegates who have registered with us, you may proceed to the dinner hall that you went to for high tea. And for students, you may proceed outside. Dinner arrangements have been made for you as well. Thank you.